Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. In today's episode, we're going to be jumping into part two of a tour of Germany. We've done one of these segments before, but Germany is very well known throughout the world as a very good producer of quality beer. Indeed, they were the first beers I had when I really started getting into quality and craft beer. Today's episode, we're doing three different lagers. We're doing two Pilsners and one Helles. So the Warsteiner, we're doing their premium, which is a Pilsner. That's 4.8% ABV. The Hoffbrau House München, that's German for Munich, by the way. The Hoffbrau Original is a Helles. This is 5.1% ABV. And then finally, the third, we're doing the Bitburger, which is their premium pills, which is of course another Pilsner, and this one is also 4.8% ABV. So I have had all of these beers, though it's been many years, so I'm looking forward to jumping into them, taking a critical eye, getting them on the ranking scale, and seeing how they compete. The two Pilsners against one another will be particularly interesting, and having a Helles in the mix just to balance it out, give us something a little bit different, but all still German lagers. So we'll jump right in, starting with the Warsteiner Premium. That's the Pilsner. Okay, so jumping right in with our first beer, the Warsteiner Premium. This is a Pilsner, 4.8% ABV. This is another really old German brand. They might have the year they were founded on here. Yep, 1753 on the label. Another really old German brewer. They brew a lot of different beers. I've had many of them. Classic German styles. Just like all German brewers, they are bound to brew under the rules of the Deutsches Reinheitsgebot, which declares that the only ingredients that are in beer, and it's four: water, malted barley, hops, and yeast. That's the end of the list. They can't age their beer over coffee. They can't put vanilla in it. They don't consider it beer. It can't be sold as beer. So they are, all of the different qualities that you get in a German beer really comes down to the inventiveness, the imagination of the brewer, the different balance of ingredients, quality of ingredients, and different varieties of ingredients that they use. And even within the same style, you'll find that all of the German brewers create very different interpretations of the exact same style. So this is going to be an interesting test just to see how different these are. Particularly these two Pilsners, and we got a nice Helles in the middle to mix it up. But all three classic German lager styles. All right, so without further ado, let's get this poured in the glass. I'm really excited. It's probably been 15 to 20 years since I've had a Warsteiner. Okay, gonna let that pour in there. Agitated it enough to get a little decent head on there. I could have been a little sloppier to get a bit better head on there. That's probably down to my pour. I haven't used this glass but a time or two. I don't need to be quite as gentle down the sides. You can see this is a classic German Pilsner. Nice light golden color, very effervescent, slow little bubbles coming up there. Even though I poured it poorly for the head, it still did form one. So let's just give it a little agitation, take a sniff. Oh, that is a classic German Pilsner. Wow, that aroma is incredible. The nose on that is fantastic. Oh, it just makes you want to jump right into it. German Pilsners are very distinct. They're not dissimilar from Czech Pilsners, but they tend to, at least in my experience, and I've had many of them, be a bit more bold. They also tend to be a bit more hoppy. So they'll typically use a malt bill that's going to create a lot of kind of toast and bready and cracker and kind of dry earthen baked good finish in there. And then they're going to use a little more bitter hops to give it a little bite. That's kind of the classic German Pilsner recipe. It's one of the reasons I love them so much. As a hophead, but you know, this is a perfect hot summer beer day for me that still gets a nice hop bite even though it's a light Pilsner and a light lager. Versus your standard India Pale Ale. But let's jump right in. It smells amazing. God, it just smells amazing. I wish you could smell how fresh and flavorful this smells. Let's jump in there. Ah, that's a stupidly refreshing beer. Stupidly refreshing. How best to describe that? It hits your mouth, and the first thing you note is how bright, and it has this almost slight honey sweetness to it. It's very grain based, it's very cereally. The malts that they use just impart this nice grainy sweetness. It's very earthy, and you get the sweetness from the malts that they use, and it still has this nice dryness as it finishes. And you really get to pick out all the grain. It tastes very, very full of grain, which indeed it is. But it's got this nice toast and biscuits and crackers kind of lingering like a multi-grain cracker. It's the best way. And the German hops they used in here, I'm sure they use German noble hops. I'm sure of it. They add just this nice bitter bite. Now, to be fair, it smells a lot more bitter on the nose than it actually imparts in the beer, because it's got such this nice malty sweetness to it from the grain bill. Oh, it's just so nice and refreshing. This is another classic hot summer day beer. I mean, you would go for this again and again and again. It's got a really long finish, considering it's just a nice light Pilsner, but that's the beauty of a quality Pilsner. This non-craft American stuff that people have been drinking for years, they may have been modeled on the German and Czech styles, but they lost their way. They are not making anything that tastes like that. And that's the highest compliment to Warsteiner. Really, really great Pilsner right here. The mouthfeel is just silky smooth. It's got a light body, as you'd expect from a Pilsner, but it's definitely got a bit more weight to it. I would say it's medium to medium light, which is appropriate for this style being a German Pils. Had I poured it better, the head would still be sitting there nicely. It's still got some residual floating on top. But this is just a really great example of a classic German Pilsner. We'll come back and get the full rating at the end, but I'm going to finish enjoying this, and then we're going to cut and move on to the Hoffbrau House München, their original, which is a Helles lager, 5.1%. Okay, now we're moving on to the Hoffbrau München. This is the Hoffbrau original. This is a Helles lager, 5.1% ABV. This is the one outlier of the trio, all lagers, but this is the only Helles, the other two being the Pilsners. So this one's going to be a little bit different, and I know I've had it, and it's been, honestly, it's probably been 15 to 20 years on all of these. So really excited to get back in and re-experience this beer again, see what it's about. So let's get this poured in the glass. If you remember from our prior German episode, you will know that the word Helles derives from the German word hell, which means light, as in light in color. Not light as in a light that generates light so that you can see. That's der Licht. Helles, adjective, hell, light. That is lovely. That is just a beautiful looking Helles lager. It is just a little bit darker than the Warsteiner Pils, and it's got a very similar head, and I poured this one quite a bit more aggressively so that the head formed on top. It's got a nice, tight, creamy formed head. The bubbles are flowing up almost in a champagne-like quality. Let's give it a little agitation and give it a sniff. Okay, on the nose, it smells like a classic Helles. A little sweet, very malty, just a hint of hops, and it's not really, a German Helles is really not that dissimilar to a German Pils. It really all comes down to quantity of malts and the hop choice. This one smells like it's going to be a maltier, sweeter, thicker beer. So let's jump in. Let's just jump right in here, see what we think. That is delicious. And I'll tell you, the aroma does not deceive. That is exactly what I expected based on the aroma alone. The nose was fantastic. It was big, sweet, malty, just a hint of hops, and that's exactly what it tastes. This beer tastes identical to how it smells. I mean, it is absolutely what you smell is what you get when you get it in there. And it's just so clean. Now, one thing I did notice, some Helles have a little more bitter finish. This one you get the bitters, but it's very balanced. In all, I'd say it's a little bit of a dry finish, but it's an equal balance of sweet malt and just a slight, subtle bitter hops. It's so well-rounded, this beer. This is balanced in spades. Mm. The body, nice medium body to it. The mouthfeel is actually quite a bit more viscous than I expected, and then it actually dries out a bit. So aside from when the beer's actually in your mouth and you're getting the sensory experience there from what it actually does, like its actual weight to itself, it does impart this slight dry finish. And that's where it opens up to these very floral and honey notes and bits of, I would say it's more cracker and biscuit in this, not so much toast, more cracker and biscuit, but mixed with that honey, and you get that dryness. This is just a well-rounded beer. And just these beautiful, beautiful, subtle bitters in the back. This is a classic Helles. I mean, this is just a great example of this style. All of these beers I expect are going to be fantastic. It's been a long time since I've had them, and I'm really glad I got to jump back in here. We'll get the full rating on this one when we come back at the end. But let's go ahead and move on to our third and final beer in this part 2 of our Germany tour series. And that's going to be the Bitburger Premium Pils, another Pilsner. That one is the same ABV as the Warsteiner, so 4.8% ABV on this one. Okay, so for our final beer, we're moving on to the Bitburger Premium Pils. This is a Pilsner, the second Pilsner in this part 2. 4.8% ABV on this one, and it's been a long, long time since I've had this one too. But if my memory serves, this is literally one of my absolute favorite Pilsners in the world. Though it's been so long, I'm very interested to see if my tastes have changed, if my taste buds have changed, if it still does it for me like it used to. So without further ado, we'll get this poured into the glass. And in case you're wondering, this brewery was founded in 1817. So it's certainly the most recent of the three. But let's go ahead and get this poured in. All right, there we go. I think I finally figured out how to pour in this glass. It's gentle for about the first quarter, and then kind of straight down the middle and give it some agitation. That'll get a nice head on there. And you can see, just like the other Pils, the Warsteiner, I mean, this looks essentially identical. The effervescence and the bubbles that you can see flowing in there are basically identical. The head is not exactly identical. It's still got reasonably tight, foamy head, not really creamy, but it does have some larger bubbles in there. Some of that could have been to how vigorously I agitated it, but I really wanted it to get a nice head formed on it this time. Let's give it a sniff. Yeah, this smells, all of these have a really nice forward aroma. There's no question about it. This one is maybe not quite as pronounced, and it does have a slightly different aroma to it. Compared to the other Pilsners, this one smells not really that malty, but it does smell sweet, almost like honey sweetness, but with a big punch of bitters on top. So it smells sweet, plus a good bitter kick. So yeah, let's jump right in and see if my memory is as good as I think it is. Oh, absolutely it is. Yeah, this takes me back, and it takes me back to a very, very, very happy place. This Pilsner is completely different than the Warsteiner. This is absolutely a hop-forward Pilsner. It's got a hop bite to it. Now it's not IPA territory, but it's got a bitter forward quality to it that, as a hophead, I absolutely love. Even though the nose, you get that honey sweetness, and you can smell the hops once you get it in. I mean, there's just a subtle sweetness, maybe 10% of the overall flavor profile, and then it's just hop, just lovely, beautiful hop. And this tastes clean. This is a super, super clean beer. Um, it has a really nice long finish, and as you might expect, it's dominated by the hop character. It really does. It finishes very long, very hoppy, and it's not dry. It's got a rather wet finish to it. Now, it doesn't have the biggest body in the world. I would say this is probably the thinnest body of all of the beers, and the mouthfeel is not dissimilar to just pure water. It's just very smooth. You would really have no indication other than the flavor that you're drinking anything other than water, just by the way it feels in your mouth. The head's already dissipating down, but again, without it coming off of a keg, a tap at a bar, pouring from a bottle with no nitrous system in it, yeah, that's about as good as it's going to get. So far, so good. I am really, really pleased with this one, and I'm also glad to know that my memory isn't as bad as maybe I thought it could have been, or that my palate has changed completely, because this would still probably be my favorite Pilsner, my go-to Pilsner of any that I've had to date, and I have had many. This one's the true Pilsner winner for me. Bitte ein Bit every time. Bitburger's classic slogan. At any rate, now that we've had all three, we're going to run through, give the final reviews. So I will go finish this up, and then we'll be right back. Okay, now that we have sampled all three of these absolutely delicious beers, let's go ahead and get them their ratings. For this one, I'm going to compare the two Pilsners like I did in the part one with the Hefeweizens, just so you can see where they stack side by side. So we started with the Warsteiner Premium. This one's 4.8% ABV. And then the beer we finished was the Bitburger Premium Pils, which is 4.8 as well. For aroma, I gave the nod to Warsteiner. It did have a more pronounced aroma, and indeed I thought it was about as perfect an aroma as a Pilsner gets, so I gave it a 10. The Bitburger was just 1 point behind with a 9. For the taste, they deviate. The Warsteiner, I did enjoy it, and it's well above average. Gave it an 8 out of 10, and that is deservedly so. But for me, the Bitburger did not fail me. My recollection was spot on. This is literally my favorite Pilsner I've had out of the many, 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 many I've had throughout my life. This is still my number one personal favorite. I gave it a 10 out of 10. That really comes down to that hop forward presence. It's just so big for a Pilsner. It's fantastic. For the body, I gave the Warsteiner an 8. And the body was just 1 point lower on the Bitburger, which, it is what it is. It just wasn't quite as robust. So a 7 for the Bitburger. We get to the mouthfeel, and it's the same thing. The 8 for the Warsteiner, 7 for the Bitburger. For the finish, I gave them both an 8, both well above average. Different finishes. Whereas this was a bit dry and kind of ended with malty, crackery, toasted bread, baked good notes. This just ended with a boot full of hops. And it really was just the most subtle honey sweetness, and then it's just hop. It's just hop town. But in balance, and that's the key. It is a Pilsner. It's not an IPA, so it shouldn't be in your face, but it's just lovely. These are both distinctly different, and they're absolutely both worth trying if you've never had them before. For the head and the retention, the Warsteiner, I gave a 6. The Bitburger, I gave an 8. They are what they are, not being on draft. It's, it is what it is. So Really no knock on either of them, but nonetheless, that's how the heads formed, and that's how they retained. For the appearance, they both get a perfect 10 out of 10. These are the classic quintessential Pilsner appearances. It's exactly what you're looking for when you think of a Pilsner, and that's what I expect to see when somebody serves me a Pilsner. The balance, they deviate again. The Warsteiner is an exceptionally well-balanced beer, and I gave it an 8 out of 10, but the balance for the Bitburger for me was absolute perfection. I gave it a 10 out of 10. And then final two categories, feelings and intangibles, and example of style. Same scores on both individual beers. So a 9 and a 10 for the feeling and intangible category, Warsteiner, Bitburger, and then the same thing, example of style, again, Warsteiner 9, Bitburger 10. That brings the final score on both of these different Pilsners to an 84 for the Warsteiner and an 89 for the Bitburger. Both absolute world-class Pilsners. 100% I recommend trying them if you're a fan of Pilsners, and certainly if you've never had them, you're in for an absolute treat. The Germans have been brewing these for a long time. They know what they're doing, and their products are excellent. These are wonderful examples of a great German Pilsner, and you cannot go wrong with either of them. My unbridled opinion is, if you like a more hop-forward beer or never had a Pilsner that was particularly hoppy, you would probably really enjoy the Bitburger. If you like a more classic Pilsner, for the style, I would say the Warsteiner is a really good way to go, but they're both fantastic. It's a personal preference. And then for the second beer we reviewed, this is the outlier, still a lager, a Helles, the Hoffbrau München. This is their original 5.1% ABV. The aroma, I gave it a 9. It was fantastic, almost Helles perfection. The taste, well above average again. I gave that an 8 out of 10. Same thing for the body, I gave it also an 8. Really nice body to it for a Helles. You know, it is a lighter beer, but this one really had some substance to it. The mouthfeel was very nice, certainly above average. I gave that a 7 out of 10. The same thing for the finish, 7 out of 10. The head and the retention on this one, this was kind of between the other two. I also gave that a 7. It formed pretty well. I would have liked it to hold on just a little bit longer, but again, without being on a tap, it is what it is. Appearance, balance, feeling and intangible category, and example of style, all four of the final categories, I gave it a 9 out of 10. This is such a great example of a Helles. It looked the part. It was exceptionally well balanced, and the way that it made me feel when I had it, yeah, that's a Helles. Hoffbrau is one of the best. I highly recommend them again. Totally different than the Pilsner. Completely different beers. These are more malty. No question about it. So if you don't like quite as bitter a beer and you've never tried it, I absolutely recommend the Hoffbrau München's Helles beer, 5.1. So that finishes up with a total score of 82. So all three of these beers, well above average offerings. These are all relatively easy to find. If you live in a big metro area, you will not have a problem getting your hands on these beers at all. I would imagine every single Total Wine nationwide sells these. Whatever your local craft beer supplier may well sell them. If there's a local German restaurant that carries some beers, these are major, well-known global beers. These are pretty easy to get your hands on, and it's certainly worth the effort if you haven't tried them. Anyway, that wraps up our part 2. This was our second tour of Germany. We'll be doing more of these because Germany is a land of beer. They are beer lovers, and man, they just make some of the best beer in the world, in my opinion. Absolutely love German beer, and these three are perfect examples of exactly why that is. So I thank you as always for tuning in. I hope you got some value here. If you'd like to stay in the loop for our upcoming review and other things we have coming down the pipeline videos, like, subscribe, and click the bell. That'll keep you in the loop when we drop videos. They will be dropping at least initially a couple times a week. And you'll know exactly when they go live so you can catch the latest beer news. And until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.